Welcome to Things You Don't Know. Today, we're focusing on a day of immense significance, Indigenous Peoples Day. I've always remembered this as Native American Day, so I use the two terms interchangeably. This day is about more than just a holiday. It's a celebration, a recognition, and an opportunity to learn. So let's dive into its origins, importance, and how we can all honor the diverse voices of Indigenous communities.
For centuries, many of us in the United States have known the second Monday in October as Columbus Day, a federal holiday celebrating the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the Americas in 1492. It is interesting to note that many myths and pieces of misinformation surrounding Christopher Columbus's first trip predominate even to this day, including the idea that he landed in what is now the United States of America. I encourage our listeners for more information to check out both our holiday podcast, which has been around for some time, and the upcoming podcast on Columbus, which will be available soon. For Indigenous peoples, this day has long been a reminder of the violence, the displacement, and the cultural erasure that followed. In response, a movement began to reclaim this day, shifting focus from Columbus to honoring the true first peoples of this land.
Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 during a United Nations sponsored conference on discrimination against indigenous populations in the Americas. The idea was simple, yet powerful. They wanted to replace Columbus Day with a holiday that honors indigenous resilience, history, and culture. Now, I'm not specifically advocating to, remove Columbus Day because it has become such a big part of our country's mythologies and histories. I am advocating for being more realistic about it and understanding it, and also honoring Native Americans indeed, because they deserve it. Now, South Dakota officially became the first U.S. state to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. That was in 1990. And since then, the movement has gained momentum across the country and beyond.
But just what does Indigenous Peoples Day represent, and why is it so important? Indigenous Peoples Day is a reminder that Indigenous people are not relics of the past. Their cultures, languages, and traditions continue to thrive despite everything they have endured. It is a day to celebrate contributions to this land and to challenge the stereotypes and historical inaccuracies that have long dominated public discourse. As a historian, I welcome that. Indigenous Peoples Day is about truth-telling. It is an acknowledgement of a painful history, one that includes colonization, forced assimilation, and the near genocide of Indigenous peoples. But it is also about celebrating the survival and flourishing against almost impossible odds of Indigenous nations.
Between the diseases such as smallpox and the deceitful practices of the settlers, the near genocide eclipsed, on a percentage basis, the Nazi Holocaust, with estimates of 95% of Native Americans being killed. 95%. Let that sink in for just a moment. That is an awful lot. Awful. Native American children were also forced to attend boarding schools where they were taught English and European traditions, and their own native traditions were suggested to be forgotten and not dealt with. And we need to remember that despite all these negative things, indigenous cultures have contributed immeasurably, not just to the United States, but to the world. From agricultural practices like the cultivation of corn, beans, and squash, known as the Three Sisters, particularly in native culture, to innovative environmental stewardship methods that have preserved the ecosystems for thousands of years. Indigenous people have taught us how to live in harmony with nature, a lesson we now need more than ever.
Absolutely. Native Americans were some of the first environmentalists. The respect they showed for the land, the water, and all living beings is at the heart of their cultural teachings. On Indigenous Peoples Day, everyone is invited to reflect on how we can adopt these values and protect the earth for future generations. Another powerful way to honor Indigenous Peoples Day is by learning about and supporting contemporary Indigenous artists, musicians, and writers. Indigenous creativity is flourishing in many forms, from poetry and painting to fashion and film.
So here's a few ways you can celebrate and honor Native American Day. First, take time to educate yourself. Read books by Indigenous authors, watch documentaries, or listen to podcasts that highlight Indigenous voices, or podcasts like this one that point out some of the factors here. Learning the true history of the Americas is an important first step towards understanding and solidarity. Second, support Indigenous owned businesses. From art to food to fashion, Indigenous entrepreneurs are reshaping industries and economies. And it's more than just having gambling casinos. And third, advocate for change in your community. Many cities and states have replaced Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day, but there's still a long ways to go. And I mean, some of the things that have happened, you might be very surprised to know about, like near where you are, Dr. Deneen, there is a parking lot which was built over top of a sacred burial ground, sacred Indigenous burial ground. Did you know that?
I did. How horrible to desecrate ancestors like that.
If it happened to a Caucasian, European person, everybody would be up in arms. Another thing you can do is you can encourage your local representatives to make this shift and speak up about why this day matters in your schools, in workplaces, and social circles.
Let us take a look back at some very important Native Americans. I'm sure most people have heard the name Hiawatha, but most will not know anything about this amazing, forward-thinking man and how his work contributed to the structure of the United States itself. Hiawatha is a significant figure in Native American history, particularly in relation to the formation of the Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Haudenosaunee, or Five Nations, later the Six Nations. He is often credited with playing a key role in uniting the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca tribes, later joined by the Tuscarora, into a very powerful alliance. This union aimed to establish peace among the tribes and to strengthen their collective political and moral influence in the region. Hiawatha's achievements and accomplishments include, as we said, creation of the Iroquois Confederacy, working along the spiritual leader Danganowida. Hiawatha helped create the Great Law of Peace, which became the foundation of the Iroquois Confederacy. Confederacy, established around the 12th century, united 5 and later 6 Iroquois-speaking nations: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca peoples, with the Tuscarora joining later. Hiawatha's diplomacy and leadership helped create one of the most sophisticated and enduring political unions in pre-colonial America. We'll find out later on it played a role outside of its own group as well. This legal framework emphasized nonviolence and consensus building among the tribes, allowing them to maintain internal peace and present a united front against all external threats. Hiawatha's advocacy for peace among previously warring tribes was revolutionary at the time. The Confederacy became one of the earliest examples of participatory democracy in North America, where decisions were made collectively, ensuring representation from each of the member tribes. The governance structure of the Iroquois Confederacy, now pay attention to this, friends, I'm going to say it slowly because it's important, is believed to have influenced the framers of the United States Constitution. Leaders like our old friend Benjamin Franklin, see our many podcasts on him, admired the Confederacy's democratic principles. Some historians argue that elements of the Iroquois government system, such as federalism and the idea of checks and balances, may have inspired the development of the United States federal government. Hiawatha's contributions to the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy's impact on political thought have left a lasting legacy on both Native American governance and the larger American democratic ideals. His work contributes significantly to the idea of unity, peace, and collective governance that still resonates in the modern United States.
You know, another amazing contributor to modern day functioning was Sacagawea. Now, Sacagawea, you probably heard the name. She was a Shoshone woman. She was born around 1788, and she played a really vital role in the Lewis and Clark expedition, also known as the Corps of Discovery, 1804-1806. This U.S. government-sponsored mission, led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, aimed to explore the newly acquired Louisiana territory, map the land, and establish trade with North American tribes. Sacagawea's contributions to the success of the expedition are remarkable and have made her an iconic figure in American history. Now, as I said, Sacagawea was born into the Shoshone tribe in present-day Idaho. At around 12, she was captured by a rival tribe, the Hadassah, during a raid and later sold or married to Toussaint Charbonneau, a French-Canadian fur trader. By the time she joined the Lewis and Clark expedition, she was pregnant with her first child. Imagine, okay, she's joining this expedition and she's pregnant. In 1804, Sacagawea and her husband Charbonneau were hired as interpreters for the expedition. Sacagawea's multilingual abilities, cultural knowledge, and geographical understanding proved invaluable throughout the journey. Her fluency in Shoshone, Hidatsa, and some English allowed her to act as a crucial intermediary between the explorers and Native American tribes. This helped Lewis and Clark secure horses from the Shoshone, led by Sacagawea's brother, which was essential for crossing Rocky Mountains. As a young woman traveling with her infant son by that time, Jean Baptiste, Sacagawea was seen by Native American tribes as a sign of peace because war parties typically did not travel with women and children. Her presence helped ease tensions between the expedition and the tribes that they encountered. Sacagawea's knowledge of the terrain and local resources was really quite vital. She helped guide the expedition through unfamiliar landscapes, identifying edible plants, finding paths, and suggesting routes. Her familiarity with the Shoshone territory was particularly useful during difficult segments of the journey, such as navigating the Rocky Mountains. No small feat, particularly in those days. Despite the challenges of being a young mother on a grueling expedition, Sacagawea contributed significantly to the expedition's success. She helped rescue important supplies when a boat capsized, ensured the group's safety, and often served, as I said, a symbol of hope and determination. While Sacagawea did not receive much recognition during her lifetime, her contributions to the expedition became more widely appreciated in the years following. Her strength, intelligence, and resourcefulness have made her a symbol of courage and perseverance. In the 20th century, Sacagawea's legacy was further cemented through monuments, books, and the U.S. Mint's release of the Sacagawea dollar coin in 2000. Although much of her life after the expedition remains uncertain, Sacagawea's role in the Corps of Discovery stands as a powerful example of the vital contributions of Native American women, what they made, the differences that they made to early American history. Another person, Sitting Bull, a renowned Lakota leader and one of the most influential Native American chiefs, played a critical role in the defense of North American lands and culture during the late 19th century. He was born around 1831 in what is now South Dakota. Sitting Bull became a symbol of resistance against U.S. expansionism and the destruction of Native American ways of life. His leadership, spiritual strength, and role in key historical events such as the Battle of Little Bighorn have cemented his legacy. Now, Sitting Bull, as I said, he was born into the Hunkapapa band of the Lakota Sioux and earned respect for his skills as a warrior and a spiritual leader. As a young man, he gained recognition for his bravery in battle, participating in raids against enemy tribes and resisting U.S. encroachment on Lakota lands. By the 1860s, he had risen to a position of leadership among the Hunkapapa, respected for his wisdom and deep commitment to preserving Lakota traditions and independence.
Sitting Bull was a central figure in the Native American resistance to United States attempts to seize Lakota territory, particularly after the discovery of gold in the Black Hills of South Dakota in the 1870s. The Black Hills were spiritually sacred to the Lakota, and the United States government had promised through treaties to keep settlers out of the region. However, as in so many other cases, after gold was discovered in 1874, the U.S. broke its treaties and allowed miners and settlers to flood the area. Sitting Bull steadfastly refused to either sell or cede the Black Hills to the U.S. government, rallying other tribes to resist further encroachment on their lands. He became a symbol of defiance against U.S. efforts to confine Native Americans to reservations, determined at any cost to preserve and protect Lakota autonomy and their way of life. Sitting Bull's most famous contribution to Native American history came during the Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand, which took place on June 25th and 26th, 1876. The battle was the result of escalating tensions between the U.S. government and the Plains tribes, particularly after the United States demanded that all Lakota and Northern Cheyenne warriors return to their reservations or face military action. In the spring of 1876, Sitting Bull, already a spiritual leader-in-chief, had a vision during a sacred Sundance ceremony in which he saw U.S. soldiers, in his words, falling like grasshoppers into the Lakota camp. This vision inspired many Native American warriors to believe they could successfully resist U.S. forces. In June 1876, thousands of Lakota, along with Cheyenne and Arapaho warriors, gathered along the Bighorn River in Montana, defying U.S. orders to return to their reservations. The United States Army, led by General George Armstrong Custer, attempted to launch a surprise attack against the large Native American encampment, underestimating both its size and strength. Custer and his 7th Cavalry were vastly outnumbered. The Native American forces, led by seasoned warriors such as Crazy Horse, Gall, and inspired by Sitting Bull's leadership, mounted a fierce defense. Custer and all of his men were killed in what became one of the most significant victories for Native American forces against the U.S. Army.
Although Sitting Bull did not directly participate in the fighting at Little Bighorn, his leadership and vision were instrumental in uniting the tribes for the battle. His spiritual leadership and unwavering resistance to U.S. policies provided the foundation for the Native American victory. The defeat of Custer shocked the United States and temporarily halted the Army's efforts to subdue the Lakota. Despite the victory at Little Bighorn, the U.S. government increased its military campaigns to force the Native Americans onto reservations. After relentless pursuit by the U.S. Army, Sitting Bull and his followers fled to Canada in 1877, seeking refuge. They remained there for several years, but by 1881, due to dwindling resources and very harsh conditions, Sitting Bull finally surrendered to U.S. forces and was relocated to the Standing Rock Reservation in Dakota Territory. Even in defeat, Sitting Bull remained a symbol of Native American resistance. He briefly did a tour with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show partially in Cincinnati in the 1880s, but eventually returned to his people. He continued to speak out against U.S. policies that oppressed Native Americans and eroded their cultures. Sitting Bull was killed on December 15th, 1890, during an attempt by Indian Agency police to arrest him at his home on the Standing Rock Reservation. The arrest was part of the U.S. government's efforts to suppress the growing ghost dance movement, a spiritual revival among Native Americans that the government feared might lead to renewed resistance. During the arrest, a skirmish broke out and Sitting Bull was shot and killed. Sitting Bull's legacy endures as a symbol of Native American resistance to oppression. His leadership at the Battle of Little Bighorn, his commitment to preserving Lakota culture, and his refusal to bow to U.S. pressure have made him one of the most iconic figures in Native American and American history in general. His life represents the struggle of Native Americans to maintain their sovereignty, culture, and lands in the face of overwhelming forces. And just a word here, when we talk about 95% of Native Americans dying, being killed off, it wasn't through battles, by the way. It was through diseases and other things that were brought here by the European invaders or settlers, however you want to look at it. Just wanted to add that in.
One of the great negative marks on our history. Now we're coming to one of my favorite stories. The ancient story of the bundled arrows is an ancient Iroquois story symbolizing unity and strength. According to the legend, the sacred peacemaker who helped form the Iroquois Confederacy gave each of the 5 nations an arrow representing their individual strength. He then bundled the arrows together and showed that a single arrow could easily be broken, but a bundle of arrows could not, symbolizing the power of unity. The principle of strength through unity became central to the Iroquois Confederacy's governance. As we said before, the governance of the Iroquois Confederacy significantly influenced the creation of the United States Constitution. Founding fathers, including Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, were inspired by the Iroquois system of government, which had a balance of power and a system of checks and balances, very similar to the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the U.S. government. The Iroquois Confederacy's Great Law of Peace, which established a democratic union among the nations, also introduced the idea of federalism, the sharing of power between local and central governments. This concept of elected representatives and mutual respect among member nations contributed to the framework of the U.S. Constitution, showing that indigenous political systems created by people many white leaders labeled savages played a key role in shaping American democracy.
Let's shift our focus to today and the contributions to society that Native Americans are making right now, what they're giving. In recent years, Indigenous artists, writers, and creators have emerged as powerful voices in the world of art, literature, and activism. These individuals are reshaping how Indigenous cultures are represented and bringing attention to the contemporary issues faced by Native American communities. Here are some prominent figures who are making significant contributions today. Joy Harjo is one of the most celebrated Native American writers of our time. She made history by becoming the first Native American poet laureate of the United States. That's a pretty big deal, actually. I mean, we made a big deal of, wasn't it Robert Frost, Sean?
Indeed.
And here we have a Native American that finally made it there. She was appointed a poet laureate of the United States in 2019 and served for 3 terms. Harjo's work explores themes of Indigenous identity, history, and resilience. Her poetry collections, such as An American Sunrise and She Had Some Horses, blend Native storytelling traditions with a lyrical contemporary style. Harjo is also a talented musician, incorporating her love for jazz and traditional native music into her performances.
Tommy Orange's debut novel, There, in 2018, has been hailed as a groundbreaking work of contemporary Native American literature. The novel tells the interconnected stories of Native Americans living in urban spaces, particularly in Oakland, California, and delves into themes of displacement, identity, and survival in modern America. Three very vital things right now. Orange's writing brings visibility to the experiences of Native people living in cities, highlighting the complexities of modern Indigenous life far removed from the stereotypes often associated with Native
That's
Americans.
for sure. Nicholas Galinan is a multidisciplinary artist whose work spans sculpture, photography, installation, and music. Gallinan's art often challenges colonial narratives and critiques the ongoing marginalization of indigenous peoples. His work has been exhibited globally, and one of his most iconic pieces, called Indian Children's Bracelet, reflects on the legacy of Native American boarding schools and the forced assimilation of Native children. Gallon is also a musician, performing as part of the group Indian Agent, blending indigenous sounds with experimental genres.
Sterling Harjo is a critically acclaimed filmmaker and co-creator of the hit TV series Reservation Dogs, which began in 2021, which has garnered widespread praise for its authentic portrayal of Native American life in rural Oklahoma. The show, which follows a group of indigenous teenagers, is groundbreaking for being one of the few mainstream series created by, written by, and starring indigenous peoples. Harjo's other films, like Mako and Four Sheets to the Wind, explore themes of indigenous identity as well as the intersection of tradition and modernity.
Louis Erdrich is one of the most prolific and respected Native American authors, having written over 20 novels, as well as poetry and children's books. Her works, such as The Roundhouse, which won the National Book Award, and Love Medicine, are often set in fictional Native communities and explore the complexities of Native life, particularly the intersections of family, justice, and survival in the face of historical trauma. Her 2021 novel, The Night Watchman, won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, further cementing her legacy in American literature.
A real achievement. Ray Zaragoza is a rising singer-songwriter whose music is deeply rooted in social justice and her indigenous heritage. Her songs, such as In the River, which protested the Dakota Access Pipeline, and the more famous Fight Like a Girl, reflect her activism and commitment to raising awareness of Native issues. Zaragoza's music blends folk, pop, and indie influences, and she uses her platform to amplify the voices of Indigenous women and to advocate for environmental justice. Carl Romero is a fine arts photographer whose work blends contemporary Native American culture with surrealism and storytelling. Romero's vibrant, large-scale images often depict Native individuals and themes in a modern context, once again challenging the stereotypical depictions of indigenous peoples in popular culture. Her photography has been exhibited in numerous galleries and museums across the United States, and her work is celebrated for its innovative representation of Native identity.
Yes, indeed. Tanya Tagagic is an Inuit throat singer who has pushed the boundaries of traditional Inuit music by blending it with genres like electronic, punk, and avant garde. Her music is raw, powerful, deeply emotional, draws on both personal and political themes, including the relationship between Indigenous people and the environment. Her album, Animism, won the prestigious Polaris Music Prize in 2014, and her performances have been lauded for their intensity and ability to transport audiences into the heart of Indigenous experience. Another one, Denise Legermadier, is an author, poet, and scholar known for her work on the history of Native American boarding schools. In addition to her academic contributions, which are a birchmark biting artist, a traditional Indigenous form of art form, her poetry collection, Bitter Tears, explores themes of trauma and healing, drawing on her experiences as a descendant of boarding school survivors. Her work highlights the importance of preserving Indigenous history and cultural practices.
Monkey Echo Hawk is a visual artist. He's known for his bold, politically charged paintings and challenge stereotypes and advocate for Native rights. His work often addresses issues that are center around cultural preservation, environmental activism, and the representation of Native peoples in the media. Echo Hawk's painting combine pop art with traditional Indigenous themes, making his work both contemporary and deeply rooted in Native history. He's also a performance artist known for live painting events that engage the audience in discussions about Native identity and social justice.
Modern day Native American artists, writers, musicians, filmmakers are playing a vital role in both preserving Indigenous traditions and pushing them forward into new creative realms. They challenge historical narratives, celebrate Native cultures, and bring contemporary Native American experiences to the forefront of global conversations. Through their work, they ensure that Indigenous voices continue to be heard, respected, and celebrated. Well, Dr. Dean, we have been going for a while, and I know that we need to stop this for today, but I did want to encourage our listeners to tune in again. We have several things coming up. Of course, as we are already mentioned, we are going to do one on Columbus Day, do a podcast on Columbus Day, and a whole variety of other things that we have going. We also are foraging ahead with History Twists, which is our podcast channel about taking a point of divergence in history and speculating on what might have followed from that divergence. I want to invite our listeners to come back.
Absolutely. And may I say so, Dr. Weaver, thank you so much for thinking of this topic. I know it's something we have wanted to cover for some time, and under your guidance, I hope we've done the subject justice as far as two outsiders can.
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you for that. And hey, thank our listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon, we hope. Bye for now.
Please keep listening, folks. Have a nice